let me tell you a story about one of the teams that we've worked with. When we got to the company in 2017, they were on their way underwater. They'd been in almost a 3-year sales slide, meaning that it just kept decreasing. They had just lost their largest account and they were struggling and didn't know what to do. Not only that, but in that environment, management had to miss a payroll. Can you imagine that? Not paying your management and leadership. Their credit lines were completely tapped out and the status looked pretty dire. And so what we're going to talk about right now is how did we take a company that's in that state? What do you do and what were the results? So here's what you have to understand. There's a very, very simple process that you can follow if you're trying to turn around a sales team that's not succeeding. And it's very likely you are, because 80% of sales teams failed to reach their quota or their sales forecast in 2023. So if that's you, listen up, because this is going to help. So when you're going through this process, you have to understand the lay of the land. There's a few things that are happening right now that are headwinds against you. There's changes in the economy, the interest rates, the private equity, all this kind of stuff. The economic headwinds are coming at you, but that doesn't matter because we can only control what we can control. So we're going to follow a 3-step process to help you turn around a failing sales team. And those 3 steps are as follows: audit, accelerate, and advance. So let's take them each one at a time. So what does audit mean? Well, I can tell you that as a career sales training and consulting company, it's probably the biggest mistake that everyone in the industry makes, and you do too. The lack of establishing a baseline or doing some sort of audit to understand the current skills, the will to sell, and the mindset and behaviors that can either sabotage or help produce sales is where we start the process, and that's where most companies fail. So for wherever you're watching this from in the world, if I said, let's go to New York City, I couldn't really create a path unless I knew what city we were coming from. And so for each person and each team, the path may be slightly different. And when we audit, what else do we need to do? We need to make sure that we're actually using a scientific, objective measurement tool. What do we mostly do? We go to our salespeople and say, what do you need better to sell? We go to our sales managers and we go, what else do you need? What could your salespeople be trained on? And we take this subjective feedback from people who are most likely not actually very good, because our proprietary research tells us that 50% of salespeople don't have the basic sales skills to be successful in B2B sales. So what's the alternative to just seeking subjective feedback from people on your team? Well, that's using an objective measurement. And you want something that will go ahead and measure the 21 core selling competencies. And those 21 core selling competencies, believe it or not, are not just things like consultative selling, value-based selling, reaching decision makers, or hunting. It also includes other things. And so it's got to measure 3 distinct areas. One of those is grit. What's the desire? Like, are they going to do the reps and get out there and be successful? Because if you're not committed to doing everything in your own power to be successful, that may not be somebody that you want on your team. The second thing that we're going to look at in that is the mindset. We all have our own beliefs that we bring into every single thing we do. And I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, companies buy the way they sell. So as an example, Walmart sells, we're the cheapest around. They also buy that way. We had a client who had a $2 million proposal in front of them. Their internal research said that they could garner $100 million in return. They chose not to because they felt the price was too expensive, because they were focused on that instead of the outcome and the ROI. Now take other companies that are out there that sell premium products and services. Now I know Peloton's had its challenges, but think about it. They've got a bike they probably have made in China for $300 or $400, $500. And they're selling it for $3,500. So when they're buying services, they're often buying based on outcome and value rather than the low end price. And as a salesperson, your team does the exact same thing. If they like to get information and they like to go and figure things out and do research, they're gonna allow that with their prospects rather than trying to control the process. And that's why mindsets and belief are so important. And then we also wanna audit their tactical skills. What are the selling motions and skill sets that they're good at? We work with companies every day, and one of the things I find out is they're like, well, we need this person to hunt. Well, then we go audit and we find out this person doesn't have any hunting skills. We say, oh, we need our customers to be better qualified. Well, they don't have good qualification skills. They don't know how to reach decision makers. Think about how much better armed you'd be from an audit perspective if you then just knew, hey, Johnny and Susie and Ann need these things, so let's build a program that helps them get better at the things that are gonna help them be successful in our industry and for our company. So that's your audit phase. It is the baseline component. It is a must do in order to understand, do you have the right people on the team? What's the ROI going to be of any investment you make, and how long is it going to take? The second step that we take is we accelerate. Now, here's something very clear and different that you need to understand. We take a short-term / long-term look in this 3-step process. So when we audit, and then we say, let's get short-term wins. And why are those so important in the accelerate process? They're critical because it continues to make sure that your sales reps, your team, and your executive leadership continue to buy into what it is that's being done to help empower the sales of your company. So we want to start with that accelerate. And how you do that is you take some of those skills you've identified, you start to upskill your individual salespeople in those skills, and then you coach them directly on how to apply those skills into existing sales opportunities. Because if we leave it to them, here's what's gonna happen. They're only gonna start applying it to, say, the new stuff that comes in. And that means you aren't gonna see any impact for 90, 120, 180 days or longer. And so we have to own that, and we have to try to help them apply it into existing deals, even when they're not an expert or totally skilled at it. But by doing so, we can demonstrate ROI and we can build excitement so that people will want to learn and want to apply. So after we've figured out where they are, we've given the team some wins, then what do we do to make sure that we continue to go? Well, the third thing that we do to continue to move forward is this. We go ahead and apply our advanced stage. And that's how we say, okay, let's take everything we've learned and that we're applying, and let's build repeatable, scalable systems and frameworks around it. You'll notice that I say systems and frameworks because do you have a framework for a discovery call? We have something called the perfect discovery meeting, and it makes sure that it's client-centric and that the client gets what they need out of it and feels value from us. It's not just about the sales process in your CRM. And so we want to make sure that we put those things in place so that we can actually scale and succeed. That's the third step, is how do we advance so that we can do this on a continual basis going forward. But I bet in the back of your head, you're probably asking the question, okay, great, Ken, so you've told us these 3 steps, whatever. What happened to the company who was failing? Let me give you the finish to that story. So here's what happened. They started this process and did a baseline audit, which told us that they needed to be better at qualifying and talking to decision makers. We applied that in the accelerate phase. In doing so, we helped them close $4 million in the first 6 months that they implemented. That was a 40% year-over-year gain, but we're not done. Then as we move forward into the advanced stage to make things scalable, make them repeatable, they added a total of $12.2 million in the next 18 months. The company went from 10 million to 60 million in 5 years. But how'd they do that? Let's talk about the individual salespeople. So they did that, by the way, with what we would call a sales tiger team. They had 4 salespeople when they were only doing 10 million. They only had 6 salespeople when they were doing 60. Because of this plan, they were able to get more effectiveness out of each and every one of them. We took one of their players, Jim, from being on a PIP plan, which is a performance improvement plan, which means you better get some stuff figured out or you're fired, to selling 3 million over the course of the next 6 months, selling 9 million the following year, and then ultimately selling 21.7 million in the 3rd year and became the #1 salesperson for the company. That's how you're able to help people progress. And if you do it on an objective basis with our proprietary research, we know that there's a specific skill set and there's a specific way that you can actually go through this process to help improve not only sales for your company, but the likelihood of success for each of your individual reps. So make sure at this point that you hit subscribe, because if you want to learn more about enterprise sales and you want to learn more about how to be effective as a CEO or a manager of a sales team, we drop this content on a weekly basis, and you can join us and check us out on all of our other socials. But as you can see, if you'll follow this 3-step process, you too can turn around a failing sales organization into multi-million-dollar closers.